You're listening to Cornhole Champions. I'm Zachary Oren Smith, and I'm sitting here with Iowa starting lines Amie Rivers and Avery Staker. I don't have to tell you about the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. To begin, we are still learning more information every day about what happened and who did it. But just to set us up, Kirk was doing one of his crowd debates at a college in Utah when he was shot fatally. A 22-year-old was arrested in connection with the shooting, while everyone is rushing to blame radicalization on the right or left for this. All we really know is that his parents were registered Republicans, but that he was not affiliated with any political party and did not vote in the two most recent general elections. We're recording this on Tuesday morning. This episode won't be posted until Wednesday morning. So, out of respect for the family and to acknowledge that things are evolving quickly right now, we won't be offering any updates on the latest twist and turn of this investigation. You can catch that from many other sources online today. For our second story, we are going to look at how Iowa and Iowans have responded to the assassination of Charlie Kirk. His death has triggered a series of reactions across the state and show a lot about how a political tragedy gets processed in our cultural moment. Avery, do you want to talk to us a little bit about the stakes here?
Yeah, absolutely, I do. How we respond to political violence says a lot about who we are as a
Mm-hmm.
society, as a culture, especially, in the realm of politics.
Totally.
And the aftermath, the response, the cultural response to stuff like this has become its own kind of beast to
Yep.
handle. The one thing that I do want to point out is there has been a rise in support for political violence. There was a 2023 study done before like the 2024 general election that said it found that 75% of America or 75% of people surveyed said that the future of American democracy was at risk and it hinged on the 2024 general election. And that same
Wow.
study found that 23% of those surveyed agreed that this is direct quote from that study. This was the language that they used to ask the question. Because things have gotten so far off track, true American patriots may have to resort to violence in order to save our country. And that
Jeez.
the 23% is up from 15% in 2021. And then the kind of party, they did like a party breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
33% of Republicans, 22% of independents, and 15% of Democrats believed that language was true. And I think statistics like that just indicate that we have a profoundly sick political culture that's steeped in
Yeah.
extremism and partisanship. And in because like as a product of that, we are witnessing various forms of political violence day in and day out, whether that be the killings of trans and non-binary people of color like Sam Nordquist and Next Benedict, or Trump ending health and environmental projects in Black communities, and women dying in hospital parking lots because Texas put a bounty on abortion providers,
Right.
or school shootings, or Black Lives Matter and anti-ICE protesters having like tactical units deployed on them. Like it's a normalization of violence as a political communication and a political action. And another thing that I do want to point out is big tech's responsibility for this. There's
Mm,
a there's
yeah.
a there's a role there's a whole conversation to be had about systems of injustice and how that feeds into the last few years of political violence. But specifically in relation to Charlie Kirk's assassination, he was a big online right wing influencer, and big tech's responsibility is capitalizing on our worst impulses and kind of sowing the seeds of this extremism that leads to a politically violent culture with the attention economy because it makes them money.
I love that point. It seems like in the aftermath of these events, it always seems like we find out that the shooter was connected in some way with one of these dark, kind of really politically charged, really radically charged groups on the internet. Yet we don't talk about the extent to which we should allow for places like 4chan to fester on the internet. That we don't talk about kind of the role that some of these online spaces play in the radicalization of folks, right? From the left, at least I hear about gun control and the extent to which we
Hmm.
need to do something about red flag laws or implement some
Hmm.
greater structures there. But you're right that there is like a kind of a communication, a kind of platform level that we just keep letting big tech off the hook for in
Right.
the aftermath of these and our response to these incidents.
Exactly. Like one of the reasons that Charlie Kirk got so popular in the way that he did was because his thing was to debate. Like
Yeah.
he would, set up that mic and talk to students or whoever would want to approach the mic and talk to him about different issues. And it would show kind of like the, right wing version of an
Hmm.
issue versus like, whatever political ideology the student had or the debater had. And that kind of like really hard line division is what big tech relies on in order
Totally.
to keep you on their apps. And yes, there's a role that like, kind of, backwoods type dark internet type platforms have like 4chan and 8chan and all the chans. But like this also happens on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, like
Yeah.
this kind of division where you, especially with like TikTok's algorithm of tailoring like a for you page of content to like a user, creates like these echo chambers of different political ideologies, and then it just like steeps that division even further.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think the major point that I have been focusing on since last week was how the internet culture and big tech's responsibility in this is.
Yeah. And I think that piece about kind of what is the lasting impact of this is really important. And because it lays out what's possible in the future. What could we do to prevent this from happening again? As we're about 7 or less than a week out from kind of when Kirk was shot in Utah. And despite being kind of a free kind of a self-branded free speech advocate, really, I mean, if there's like a lasting legacy, I think, of Kirk following his death, it's certainly in cancel culture. It's certainly in the mob that has been the posse that has been drummed up in order to go after folks who posted about his death. Since then, Amie, can you talk a little bit about kind of what we've seen, at least in the state of Iowa, kind of response to Kirk's death and some of these kind of feckless posts that we've seen from folks reacting to his death.
Yeah, I mean, several Iowa educators are catching heat for this. Like shortly after that video of Kirk went viral, Iowa Republicans began amplifying comments, posts, some with context, some not really with context, of teachers and professors who seemed like they could be, if not celebrating the assassination, at least saying, here is what he actually stands for, So
Right.
the Board of Regents is reviewing an Iowa State employee's contact, and at least one Iowa teacher could be fired actually after a social media post about Charlie Kirk's death. I believe they're deciding that at a board meeting tonight in
Yeah.
Oskaloosa. So it seems like, to the layman, probably that this is like, oh, well, they just, were out of line saying this and they're getting justice, whatever. But this is actually a much larger project of the conservative movement, and specifically in Project 2025. I mean, that document is all about protecting conservative speech over other types of speech. And it's already leading to censorship, mostly self-censorship. And in the case where people are refusing to self-censor themselves, it will lead to job loss. I mean, it will lead to possibly worse things. It could lead to jail time eventually, So, like,
Yeah.
these are things that we really have to watch out if we're in what we consider to be a democracy that has a robust First Amendment that includes free speech, because free speech includes all speech.
Yeah.
And if we have free speech, then we should be able to not say things without consequence, but say things without feeling like our government is going to come down on us, which is what's happening when you're seeing the Marionette Miller Meeks talking about going after individuals. That is what concerns me as a proponent of the First Amendment.
Yeah, there's like I think two things can be true at once, right? I saw the post about the post that read from one teacher that read one Nazi down. And I think we can say that like devalues life in a way that is outside of my personal ethical framework, is outside of what I think is acceptable. And that's outside of like a conversation about like what is permitted speech, what is legal speech, but like what is the speech that we ought to be having in a society, right? And I think there are big
Right.
questions to be asked about like whether or not a teacher who is teaching students ought to be. But I don't think I think the question here isn't about like what is literally legal. It's about like what to the extent to which there should be consequences or not for free speech. Um, and like I think that we are taking outside of this like kind of ideological conversation, I think, and thinking more about like a tactics and a strategic conversation. I think teachers should be aware that like they are being watched at all times, right? And like that's just a reality of living in this state in this moment, right?
Right.
We saw in the University of Iowa, right, how folks were taking hidden cameras into meetings with staffers, trying to get them into trouble over
Yep.
using these supercut videos of like their responses to what might to questions about whether or not DEI was being used in decision making on campuses. People are being surveilled. People are being watched, and the consequences for speech are tremendous. Right? Again, right? If there is a legacy of Kirk or of the like kind of if there's a cogent message of the conservative movement, right? It's one that you will be canceled for things that you believe, things that you say out loud, and that's just where we're at. I do think that some of the comments I've seen that people are going after were reprehensible, right? I do think reveling in the death of Charlie Kirk sucks. I think the glee that I was seeing from some friends of mine was disgusting, right? But I think it's also true, right? That we don't want to be in a place where we are surveilled at all moments, right? That we can feel complicated about the legacy of Kirk and um, his assassination, right? I think that's okay, right? I think we have to create space to believe two things are true at once: that assassination is never okay in any form in our country, and also that someone's legacy, the legacy of the assassinated, his remarks on black people, on
Right.
Islam, on trans people, that those are reprehensible. I think we can
So
do,
there's a
but
lot of complicated feelings. I think that kind of like the duality of all of that, the complexity, I think, is what we need to have a lot of space for. And I like I said earlier about big tech, that doesn't get them the engagements, that doesn't get them
totally.
the attention that they need. That requires like really meaningful discussion and empathy and a
Mm,
lot of, not necessarily, I don't want to say understanding, because like you said, Zach, like it's not necessarily you don't understand like maybe why people would say some things that you might deem like reprehensible, but like you don't understand like the logic behind it or the meaning behind it. But like at the end of the day, it's speech, it's a way that people feel, and like in a democracy like ours, people should be able to express those things and not, like Amie said, be scared of having the government come down on them.
right. And talking about the kind of state of compelled speech, I wanted to turn us back to the Johnson County Board of Supervisor Chair, John Green, issued some guidance for for the county government. He wrote in a statement, "On my personal authority as the chairman of the Johnson County Board of Supervisors, I've determined to defy the governor's order that our colors be at half staff through Sunday on behalf of Charlie J. Kirk. I condemn Kirk's killing, regardless of who pulled the trigger or why, but I will not grant Johnson County honors to a man who made it his life's mission to denigrate so many of the constituents I've sworn an oath to protect, and who did so much to harm not only the marginalized, but also to degrade the fabric of our body politic. Johnson County flags will fly as usual. I will accept any consequences, whether legal or electoral, for my decision. It is mine alone. In the conformance with the governor's order, this is the actual statement, that was a Facebook post. Our flags will fly at half staff tomorrow in remembrance of 9/11. Further guidance will be forthcoming. I ask that we keep all victims of gun violence, including the slain Colorado students, at the front of mind as we serve. There is no national database, and so we're unlikely to ever know how many we lost today, Wednesday, 10th September. For most of us, this date will pass. For far too many, this date will now become the worst anniversary of their lives. Please extend whatever grace you are able to our neighbors who serve, for we know not of their burdens. I say this knowing you and your staff do so every day on behalf of the board with grim determination. John Green. Powerful statement that I think speaks to this like kind of like dual sensibility, right? That we can condemn an assassination, we can condemn political violence, and also be honest about kind of legacy of a person,
and not honor them. Yeah,
and not honor
that's
them.
amazing.
Amen. But that was not reacted to very nearly as positively as it seems we are. Governor Kim Reynolds had a statement when I think the Guardian picked up this story. It was like,
Jesus,
county official defies governor's Trump's demand for half-mast flags. Reynolds wrote in a statement, "It's disgraceful that a locally elected official has chosen to put politics above human decency during a time like this." Reynolds said in a statement provided to the Gazette, "Charlie Kirk's profound impact on our country's youth should be honored, which is why I ordered all American flags on state grounds and buildings to be lowered in accordance with the presidential proclamation. Our state has a long-standing history of complying with such orders, regardless of which political party occupies the White House. I strongly encourage local governments, schools, businesses, and Iowans across our state to fly the flags at half-staff in solidarity as a symbol condemning political violence of any kind." I thought this response was interesting because, like, I feel like he speaks pretty clearly to human decency in the remarks. Maybe Reynolds didn't have a chance to read it, but Henson, U.S. Representative Ashley Henson, also responded to this. She's now running for U.S. Senate. She said on Twitter, "This should be universally condemned. I can't believe an elected official at any level would celebrate the political assassination of Charlie Kirk." I read the words grim determination. Didn't sound like a celebration to me. But
no, that's not very celebratory.
But like speaking to the statement itself would be against kind of whatever political incentive she has. So I understand why nuance isn't the thing that she wants to go with. That's
for sure. No. Well, I mean, you just kind of said it. Like the use of the word celebration is interesting when like it might not seem like a celebration, but like based on the news coverage over the last week, it seems like the right is using this as a way to further like an ideology or an agenda. Like,
correct.
We posted a video last week of Jesse Waters calling for war on Fox News, and like in the hours after this happened, it was all like radical leftist violence, all this stuff, and like Laura Loomer was like, we should shut down all leftist organizations, launch full investigations into the left. And like, there was all of this like finger pointing of like, this is a leftist that did this. This is all the leftist fault. This is theirs. And they used this instance. They like celebrated this instance as a way to push that.
Yeah. I think it's unsurprising that an Iowa politician would seize on this moment to kind of make hay out of the death of someone, the use of political violence against one of their own. Many things can be true at once. When we talk about Charlie Kirk, we're talking about a man who drummed up suspicions about Black Supreme Court justices, athletes, and particularly Black pilots as unqualified, who believed in breaking down the separation between church and state, so long as it's a Christian church. Someone who plied conspiracies that there was an effort to replace white people in the United States with some other racial group, the so-called Great Replacement theory. He believed that some gun deaths were acceptable, that they were sometimes a, quote, prudent deal. All of that can be true. Also, his death is unacceptable. The bullet that was fired last week may have killed Kirk, but it was aimed at all of us who do work in public, who want for a free and open society, who want a democracy for this nation. The question you should ask yourself in the coming days is whether responses are in service of the public, of bettering our nation, or are they in service of party bosses, of entrenched power, of people trying to make hay out of it? What is a tragedy? And with that, let's take a break.